Shut up! The Footy's on Triple M!
This is a Triple M Footy news update
This is massive, this story. Got a little exclusive.
with Tom Browne.
It's Friday, the 25th of June, which means it's time for a fresh instalment of Triple M Footy's news update with Tom Browne. My name's Rudy, and we've got Tommy here to go through all the fallout from Brisbane's thumping win over Geelong, Cardinia Park looking set to host a non-Cats game, and Robert Harvey's first game at the helm of the Pies. How are you, Tommy?
Good morning, Rudy. Lots to discuss this morning. Can't wait to get into it. But wasn't it interesting last night?
It was, it was very interesting. Brisbane meant business from minute one and just did not let the foot off the throat of the Cats, did they?
No, they didn't. It ended Geelong's 6-game winning streak. This was Chris Scott post-game, who didn't seem too concerned about the result. It was a bit of a blip as far as he was concerned.
I think in the context of the season for us, at first blush, the takeaway for me is we've got a bit to work on. We shouldn't gloss over it, but we also shouldn't drop our bundle. We're in a pretty good position, have played much, much better than that. I'm confident we'll play much better than that for the rest of the season too. But everyone has their off nights. We just seem to have a whole lot of our important players have off nights together.
So, Rudy, some stories to come out of last night. Obviously, the three monsters, according to Lee Matthews, became the three minnows in terms of Cameron, Hawkins and Rowan. It was a good call by Lee Matthews. Those three forwards had kicked 64 goals, according to a stat I read this morning, in the last 8 games. Last night, they only kicked 2 combined, and it was in junk time, the final quarter.
Yeah, indeed. It was just not a like as Scotty said, pretty much all of Geelong's good players had a down night, all of their important players. I think a talking point out of this one, Tommy, is Shaun Higgins.
Yeah, sort of got butchered around the ball. Brisbane just relentlessly pressured Higgins. He was managed, quote and unquote, last week and then had a pretty ordinary game last night. I thought Brisbane were really smart in terms of how they played him, like 2 and 3 and 4 players almost ganging up on him. It sort of made life difficult. That pressure was uniform across the board. It wasn't just on Higgins, but Higgins had a rough night. So did Selwood. They shut down Selwood. I mean, Devon Robinson, who's a young player for the Lions, Selwood last night had 13 touches, but as you mentioned, Rudy, it was consistent, a whole bunch of players. I thought they also, showed signs of missing Mitch Duncan as well, who's I think really important for the Cats. Having said that, they'll come back, play Essendon, set themselves up for next weekend. I think it's Friday night.
Yep.
And just concentrate on the Bombers. I reckon Chris Scott will just put that one down in the book and move on.
West Coast and Sydney, now they look like they're going to play in Geelong next week, Tommy.
It's the latest fixture issues. Gil McLaughlin spoken this morning on 3AW and indicated that West Coast and Sydney, who are due to play next week, will most likely play at GMHBA. The AFL early this afternoon will release the fixture for next weekend in terms of the times and dates of all the various games. Sydney and the Giants are currently in Melbourne. I spoke to the Players Association yesterday, who reiterated their position. Their expectation is that those Sydney players will get back to Sydney in 2.5 weeks' time for Sydney Giants, which is due to be played in Sydney. Now, there's 2 obvious problems with that. There's 22 cases COVID in Sydney today. Having said that, 21 of the 22 are linked to existing cases, so they still think they're on top of it. They've done a stay-at-home order for those 4 municipalities in the eastern suburbs, including the city of Sydney. The other issue, Rudy, is that if you did let Sydney and the Giants go back to Sydney and they got stuck there, then that would derail the whole season. So I think it's highly likely, I should say, that Sydney and the Giants will have to stay here for probably around 3, 4, 5 weeks. Can't guess the COVID numbers. And the players will have to make some concessions in that regard. What's also interesting about that is that both teams are in finals contention. So it's not like some of the senior players or some of the family guys will be like, I want to go home to Sydney. They'll all be desperate to keep playing, including Big Budwa, who stuck with the hub last year and has showed no sign so far of having any issue with Sydney being in Melbourne.
Yeah, that's right. It's as you said, it's a very difficult logistical thing there for the AFL, but it's not as bad as last year because at least Melbourne is able to take them and they'll be able to have games in Geelong.
But there are active cases now in Brisbane, Melbourne and Sydney. There's a commitment and a determination on the part of the AFL and the Players Association not to have hubs this year. We're still not close to hubs, but the AFL's wriggle room and margin for error at the moment is getting thinner and thinner.
Indeed it is. I was actually meant to be in Sydney the weekend of the derby, and I reckon, personally, I don't think I'll be going up there.
I think it's Project Apollo is what the code name inside the AFL for keeping the season going.
Oh, really?
They have all sorts of meetings, and they're very good at it.
I love that. That's a perfect sort of project name, isn't it? Apollo. Absolutely love it.
Sounds like a clandestine mergers and acquisitions, like when you're trying to take over a rival company.
Yeah, indeed. Now, we can't go an entire podcast without talking about Carlton. Tommy, you broke some injury news out of there last night.
Yeah, so David Teague spoke yesterday. I'll get to that shortly. I thought it was interesting, but some injury news. Pitney does require ankle surgery and will most likely miss the rest of the season. That leaves them short from a tall point of view. Michael Gibbons did his hamstring yesterday and is likely to miss the rest of the season. And Zach Fisher did an ankle injury yesterday and will miss at least this week. Now, who knows how long that'll be. So that was a triple injury blow ahead of a game that you think would shape now David Teague's coaching future. It was a different tone from David Teague yesterday during his press conference. He spoke very well, very frankly, gave a fresh assessment, and a frank assessment, I should say, of Zach Williams, admitting that their $900,000 recruit at the moment's not fit enough, in his own words, to go the full time in the middle. So they're sort of working through that. He also, I think, Rudy, went into interesting insight and gave a bit of an insight into the fact that David Teague can clearly coach. I asked him why Sam Doherty didn't play on Toby Green last week, why they left Newman on Green. And he said, well, they needed Doherty at the back of the contest because they were getting smashed basically in the contest. The ball was leaking out the back and they needed Doherty to stiffen them up. So it was a good insight into the fact that David Teague, obviously, he's a senior coach, but he clearly knows a thing or two about coaching. And I think you'll find that some of his press conferences will change a bit now. And I think he'll give a good insight into how he coaches and some of his views. If he's going to go down, Rudy, he may as well go down swinging and actually just say what he thinks.
Yeah, why not?
Give an insight into the fact that he can coach. He's been on message about all these, he's been very sort of politically correct, hasn't he, so far this year? I think it just frustrates Carlton fans, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way from the Carlton fans that I have contact with.
Just on the review, Rudy,
Yep.
Sam McClure reported this week they're speaking Carlton to senior assistants. Carlton yesterday said that they are, which is hard for the existing assistants who are probably going to lose their job. And it's also weird in that the senior coach, you think, if they appoint a new one, would want say over the senior assistants. But with the John Barker vacancy, they've got on the front foot and they're out speaking to some people.
Okay. All right. One to watch there. Now let's move on. Tommy, you've been pretty hot on this story the whole time. Mitch Lewis at Hawthorn. What's the latest?
So the latest is the AFL's told me this morning they still don't think there'll be an investigation outcome concerning Hawthorn today. The million-dollar question is whether Hawthorn will be fined for Mitch Lewis's concussion boxing at training and whether the AFL will ban boxing. I think they will in some form ban boxing. As for whether Hawthorn will be sanctioned, it's not clear yet. Mitch Lewis spoke publicly for the first time yesterday. Hawthorn, to their credit, put him on their website, and he did reveal that he won't play this week, could miss a fourth week. He's trying to get back to full training over the next sort of week and a half or so, and did say that he's 95% right, but not 100% right. That's code for he's still got some symptoms from these concussions. So it's easy to brush off these boxing incidents, Rudy. I know concussion's part of the game. I know accidents are part of the game. But there's nothing fun about still having concussion symptoms, albeit 5% symptoms 3 or 4 weeks after getting knocked out training. It's not an ideal situation. So I expect that we'll get an outcome from the AFL. Unlikely over the weekend, probably now early next week. But Mitch Lewis has spoken.
Okay, another one to watch there. Now, this week, Tommy, marks Robert Harvey's first game at the helm of Collingwood.
It's always intriguing, Rudy, to see what a coach is going to do compared to the existing coach. Harves will clearly come at it from his own perspective. He was asked yesterday whether he'll apply for the senior job. He said, well, he's not considering that at the moment. He just wants to work on the next 9 weeks, which is, I think, a polite way of saying perhaps he is interested, but we'll find out. I mean, he went for the North Melbourne job and got beaten there. Also interesting to see what they do from selection. And Mason Cox is back this week. So clearly he thinks that Cox, I think Cox was definitely on the outer with Bucks and probably wouldn't have played again for Collingwood. And it sounds like Harves wants to give him some type of role. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. In what looks like a winnable game against Fremantle, having said that, Darcy Moore out for the season is a big loss, but Big Brody's back. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, no Jordan Tagoe out for suspension is also a pretty big loss.
Huge loss. So, sort of Harves is pushing uphill in that regard, but it'll be interesting to see how Collingwood go in that slot tomorrow afternoon at 1:45 at Marvel.
That is correct. That is when they're playing. Big weekend for
Just
them.
on the Pies, I think the EGM people are still collecting signatures and we'll speak to some of the coterie groups this weekend. That's still going on in the background. Self-described conflict there. Obviously, I'm related to the person trying to become president, so full disclosure. But that's just what's going on there, Rudy.
Indeed. So more to watch there. It's a big weekend, as we said, for the Pies. It's also a big weekend for West Coast and the Western Bulldogs. Pretty excited about that game because they played one of the games of the season earlier on in the year in Melbourne. But I think we can just about leave that there, Tommy.
Looking forward to Friday night football tonight, Rudy. There's a lot going on in the background at St Kilda. Simon Lethlean looking deeply into their issues, as is Matt Finnis. They've been reporting back to the board. Effectively, they need to sort of drive higher standards to the playing group. So it'll be interesting to see how they go against the Tigers. Friday night football, St Kilda, big stage tonight. St Kilda need to find a way of turning it around. Doesn't look like it at the moment, but I think it's going to be a really interesting game.
And they've also got the added context of getting really smashed by Richmond earlier in the year. So very, very interesting to see how that plays out. You'll be there, Tommy?
Definitely there for Triple M, Boundary, and Friday night football on 7. Really can't wait.
Nice. 2 paychecks
With the
there,
duck.
Tommy. Quite
Two
like it.
paychecks. I need all. I always said you're retired at work and need all the paychecks I can get.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, yes, again, we'll
Looking
leave
after Henry.
we'll leave that there, Tommy. Thanks for coming in today, and we'll speak to you again next week.
Thanks, mate.